Throughout the Age of Legends, before the breaking of the world, there existed a group of humans dedicated to a pacifist philosophy known as the Way of the Leaf, faithfully serving the Aes Sedai leaders of their society, powerful magic users capable of channeling shai'tan and saidar, the male and female halves of the One Power. Content with their lives of peace and simplicity, the Deshane Aiel worked the fields alongside Ogier and Nim, singing the Song of Growing as they labored, which accelerated plant growth and yield. During these years, under the leadership of the Aes Sedai, civilization progressed significantly. However, in time it all began to collapse after an attempt to drill a hole through the pattern of reality, creating the Bore, an opening which allowed an ancient evil known as the Dark One or shai'tan to directly influence the world. Over the next century, many came to worship this primordial being, turning their backs on society to embrace violence, selfishness, and greed, with a shadow spawn army eventually rising to wage war against those who remained faithful to the light. Although the conflict was long and devastating, in the end, the dragon Leustherin Telamon and his followers were able to defeat the Dark Armies, successfully sealing the Bore and trapping the 13 most powerful Forsaken into the Dark One's prison. However, because the female Aes Sedai refused to help Leustherin, their victory came at a terrible cost, as shai'tan was able to perform a counterstroke, tainting the male half of the One Power. This then drove male channelers into madness, as they began to abuse shai'tan to such an extent, it caused the reshaping of continents and breaking of the world. As these powerful sorcerers rampaged across their lands, the female Aes Sedai, who drew power from saidar and so were unaffected by the taint on shai'tan, dedicated themselves to eliminating the threat and rebuilding civilization. As the very lands beneath them changed and their homelands became war zones, the female Aes Sedai summoned their trusted servants, the Deshane Aiel, to embark upon a crucial mission. In order to prevent their enemies from taking possession of powerful relics, which held the potential for mass devastation, they gathered together as many as possible and sent them away with the Deshane Aiel, who were told to find a safe and secret location to keep them hidden. Although much of Deshane culture revolved around honor, peace, and loyalty, their great journey into the east was fraught with peril and greatly tested their resolve. The Aiel did not fear self-sacrifice, as was seen in the land of Tizora, when 10,000 of their people sang a great song in order to calm the mad mind of a male channeler who was threatening to destroy the city. One by one, the Aes Sedai killed the Aiel, but still they continued to sing, giving the local people as much time as possible to evacuate. Eventually, the last of them fell, and Jarek Mondoran destroyed the city, but through their sacrifice, they succeeded in saving many lives. Yet as they underwent their great journey into the east, conditions grew increasingly challenging as they were surrounded by chaos and violence, constantly being attacked, yet unable to defend themselves because of their beliefs. In time, some began to question their mission, wanting to return to the lives of peace and tranquility they knew before the war. And so the Tuatha'an, or traveling people, soon broke apart from the main group, led by Sulwyn, who turned his back on their duty after the death of his last son in a raider attack. Becoming nomads, they went their own way in order to focus on fully embracing the Way of the Leaf and finding the song in reference to the peace and simplicity of their lives during the Age of Legends. As the rest of the Deshane Aiel continued on, others soon began to question their ways as well, believing that it was necessary for some of their kind to become warriors and defend the others. After an attack in which several of their people were captured, a party of 5 Aiel left the main group and made their way into the enemy camp on a rescue mission. However, when a raider charged against them, the Aiel defended themselves, and so their leader Luwin grabbed a spear and killed his attacker. In the end, all of the outlaws were dead, along with one of their Aiel companions, who they carried back to the main camp. Although the party successfully rescued their people, the other Deshane were outraged by their use of violence, shunning and disowning Luwin and the others. Yet these exiles still cared for their former friends and family, wanting to continue protecting them, and so started to train with their spears, following the Deshane without permission, in order to defend them against violence, even if they would not defend themselves. Others soon followed their example and picked up the spear, training with them to form an unofficial defensive force. Those who became warriors were simply called Aiel, and continued to honor their heritage by wearing veils in order to hide their faces out of shame for abandoning their ancient ways. They also refused to pick up a sword, as it had always been forbidden, instead focusing on learning spear-based combat. Those who remained faithful to their pacifist philosophy and mission were known as the Gen Aiel, continuing their travels east alongside unwanted protectors, and finally arriving in the desert wastes to found the city of Ruidion, where they completed their mission by hiding and protecting the relics of the Aes Sedai. Love audiobooks? Then be sure to check out Audible, where they have the world's largest collection available. Simply sign up through the link in the description box below and get 2 free audiobooks to start out. A special thanks to all those who contribute to CivilizationEx, like Fen the Sundowner, Sir Pagelot the Death Dealer, Killian Shadowcat, and the Winter Sorceress, Madam Faith of House Scarisbrick, Warden of the North and Keeper of the White Cloak. If you would like to help CivilizationEx, click on the Patreon link, and please be sure to like and subscribe, and click on the links to see more.